Have you ever felt like you made a deal where you got the short end of the stick? A compromise that felt more like a defeat? It's a tough pill to swallow, but sometimes what looks like a loss is actually a setup for the greatest victory. Today, we're diving into one of history's most brilliant strategic moves, a moment that completely changed the course of Islam. The Treaty of Hudaybiyyah. This wasn't just any agreement. It was a masterclass in patience, wisdom, and seeing the bigger picture when everyone else saw a surrender. Let's set the scene. It's the 6th year after the Hijrah, the migration from Makkah to Medinan. For 6 long years, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers have been away from their homes, their families, and the Kaaba, the sacred house of God that was the center of their spiritual lives. A deep yearning to perform the Umrah, the lesser pilgrimage, filled their hearts. So, the Prophet announced his intention. He saw a dream in which he and his companions were peacefully entering Mecca and performing the rituals of pilgrimage. This was a powerful vision, a sign of hope. Responding to his call, about 1,400 Muslims prepared for the journey. They were unarmed, carrying only the simple travelers' swords sheathed in their scabbards, which was customary for desert travel. They brought sacrificial animals with them, wearing the simple white garments of ihram. Every sign pointed to a peaceful pilgrimage. Their intentions were purely for worship. But as they approached Makkah, news reached them that the Quraysh, the ruling tribe of Makkah and their staunchest opponents, had no intention of letting them in. The Quraysh had gathered an army, blocking the path to the city. They saw this as a provocation, a threat to their authority. They were ready for a fight. The Prophet, however, was determined to avoid conflict. His mission was peace. He camped at a place called Hudaybiyyah, just outside the sacred precinct of Makkah. From here, a tense period of negotiation began. Envoys went back and forth between the two camps. The Muslims sent messages of peace, explaining they had come only as pilgrims. The Quraysh sent their own representatives to gauge the situation, and what they saw astounded them. They saw a leader and followers bound by a love and respect they had never witnessed. When the Prophet performed ablution, his companions would rush to catch the water before it touched the ground. They hung on his every word. One of the Quraysh envoys returned to his people and said, "I have been to the courts of kings, Caesar, Khosrow, and the Negus, but I have never seen a king so revered by his followers as Muhammad is by his companions." Despite this, the Quraysh remained stubborn. Tensions escalated when the Muslim envoy sent to Makkah, Uthman ibn Affan, was detained, and a rumor spread that he had been killed. This was a grave violation of diplomatic norms. In response, under a tree at Hudaybiyyah, the Prophet took a pledge from his companions. Known as the Pledge of the Tree, or Bayat Ridwan, they swore an oath of allegiance, vowing to stand by the Prophet even unto death. This moment of profound unity and resolve was so significant that it's mentioned in the Quran, with God expressing his pleasure with those who made the pledge. Thankfully, Uthman was safe, and the negotiations resumed. The Quraysh sent their final envoy, Suhail ibn Amr, a man known for his tough negotiating skills. After lengthy discussions, they finally reached an agreement. And this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The terms of the treaty seemed, on the surface, incredibly one-sided and humiliating for the Muslims. Let's break down the key terms. First, the Muslims had to return to Medina that year without performing Umrah. They could come back the next year, but only for 3 days. Second, there would be a truce, a peace treaty, for 10 years. No fighting between the Muslims and the Quraysh. This was a major point. Third, and this was the most difficult clause to accept. If a member of the Quraysh fled to Medinan to become a Muslim without their guardianess' permission, the Muslims had to send them back to Makkah. However, if a Muslim from Medinan fled to Makkah, the Quraysh did not have to return them. Can you imagine how this felt? The companions were heartbroken. They had traveled all this way, filled with spiritual longing, only to be turned away. The final clause felt like a betrayal of their own people. The great companion, Umar ibn al-Khattab, was so distressed that he went to the Prophet and questioned the decision. He asked, "Are we not on the right path? Why should we accept this humiliation in matters of our faith?" The Prophet, with calm and divine certainty, replied, "I am the messenger of God, and he will not abandon me." Even the act of writing the treaty was a test of patience. When the scribe began within the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, the Quraysh negotiator, Suhail objected, "We don't recognize the most gracious." "Write in your name, O God," the prophet agreed. Then, when the scribe wrote, "This is what Muhammad, the messenger of God, has agreed to," Suhail objected again. "If we believed you were the messenger of God, we wouldn't be fighting you. Write your name and your father's name." The prophet, with incredible humility and foresight, instructed the scribe to erase messenger of God and write Muhammad, son of Abdullah. The companions were in a state of shock. They felt defeated. After the treaty was signed, the prophet instructed them to shave their heads and offer their sacrifices, completing their pilgrimage rites right there at Hudaybiyyah. But no one moved. They were too dejected. The prophet went into his tent, concerned. His wife, Summa Salama, gave him a brilliant piece of advice. She said, "Go out and do it yourself, without saying a word to anyone." The prophet did just that. He silently went out, offered his sacrifice, and had his head shaved. When the companions saw their beloved leader act, they all rose and followed suit, a powerful testament to their ultimate loyalty, even in their disappointment. So, on the surface, this looked like a huge political loss. But the prophet, guided by divine wisdom, saw what no one else could. He understood that this unfair treaty was, in fact, a clear victory, as the Quran would later describe it. How? First, the 10-year truce was a game-changer. For the first time, the Quraysh officially recognized the Islamic State in Medina as an equal. The constant state of warfare had drained resources and prevented the message of Islam from spreading. With peace established, the Muslims could now focus on dua. On inviting people to Islam, the truce allowed for open dialogue and interaction. People who were once enemies could now meet, talk, and learn about Islam without fear. Second, the treaty allowed the message of Islam to flourish. In the 2 years following the treaty, the number of people who embraced Islam was greater than all the years before it combined. The tribes of Arabia who were hesitant to align with the Muslims while they were at war with the powerful Quraysh now saw them as a legitimate and stable power. Many of these tribes entered into alliances with the Muslims. And what about that seemingly unjust clause about returning new converts to Makkah? This is where the strategic genius truly shines. Shortly after the treaty, a man named Abu Bazir escaped from Makkah and came to Medina seeking refuge as a new Muslim. True to his word, the prophet sent him back with the Quraysh escorts. But on the way, Abu Bazir cleverly managed to overpower his guards and escaped again. Instead of returning to Medina, where he knew he couldn't stay, he established a small settlement on the coast, along the Quraysh trade route. Soon, other men who had escaped Makkah and couldn't be accepted in Medina joined him. This group started raiding Quraysh trade caravans, becoming a huge problem for Makkah's economy. The Quraysh were now in a bind. They couldn't control this rogue group, and the treaty meant that Muslims in Medina couldn't be blamed. Finally, the Quraysh themselves wrote to the Prophet, begging him to nullify that part of the treaty and accept the fugitives into Medina. The very clause that seemed so unfair ended up working entirely in the Muslims' favor. The Treaty of Hudaybiyyah teaches us profound lessons. It shows us the power of patience in the face of provocation, the importance of seeing the long-term goal instead of short-term setbacks, and the wisdom in choosing peace and dialogue over conflict. It demonstrates that true strength isn't always about winning the battle. Sometimes, it's about winning the peace. The clear victory wasn't about entering Makkah that day. It was about opening the hearts and minds of people across Arabia, paving the way for the peaceful conquest of Makkah just 2 years later, an event that would solidify the future of Islam for all time. It's a powerful reminder that with faith, patience, and strategic thinking, what appears to be a setback can be the very key that unlocks your greatest success. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.